that cat, Miss Summers, to go driving in the park with me, and she said she was too busy. And yet I have just seen her driving in a vis-a-vis with that antidote, Miss Flanders." "Perhaps she had a previous arrangement," said the Countess. "We have also been discussing the idea of hiring a companion for you." "That would be fun," said Ismene, pleating the fringe of her stole. "I mean, a companion would have to go everywhere with me, would she not?" "Your father has promised to attend to the matter urgently. Whom are you going to employ, Clifton?" The Earl threw down his newspaper and marched to the door. "I am going to my study to think about it," he snapped. Once in his study, the Earl sighed with relief and sent for brandy to soothe his nerves. This Marquess of Rockingham would never put up with such henpecking, he thought. But he decided the sooner he found someone to accompany Ismene, then the sooner he would be left in peace. He went over to his desk, dipped a pen in the standish, and furrowed his brow as he turned over the names of various poor relations. If only he could think of someone staid and practical who would be a good influence on his spoilt daughter. His thoughts turned longingly to his country home, Beechings. In his mind's eye, he could see the graceful porticoed entrance, the rose gardens, and the smooth lawns. On the edge of his estates lay the village of Serral, a pretty, picturesque place with its old Norman church. As a picture of the church floated across his inner eye, he sat upright. What had been the name of that curate? Westerville, that was it. He had read a most affecting sermon one Christmas when the vicar had been ill. Sterling fellow! And he had a daughter who must now be Ismene's age. He had heard Westerville was ill. Now, in return for the use of his daughter, he would send this Westerville the best physician and enough funds to ensure he could hire proper care while his daughter was in London. What was the girl's name? Pretty thing, lovely hair. Ah, Lucinda. That was it. The Earl of Clifton began to write busily. Lucinda Westerville sat in the shed in the garden of her family cottage, waiting for the water in the copper to boil. The vast copper basin held by its brick framework had been laboriously filled with pails and pails of water carried from the pump. In a basket on the floor beside the copper lay a pile of sheets. Once the water was boiling, Lucinda would put them in the copper, boil them for an hour, and hope that some of their yellowish hue would be miraculously taken out. The women in the village used a mixture of chicken dung to whiten yellowing linen, but Lucinda could not bring herself to mix anything so evil-smelling into the wash. Lucinda was not pretty by the standards of London fashion. Her nose was too short, and her mouth was a trifle too generous. Her eyes were hazel and fringed with long lashes, and her chestnut hair was thick and had a natural curl. But she was too tall and too thin in an age when plump bosoms and rounded arms were much admired. The water in the copper began to bubble. She raised the heavy wooden lid and then heaved up the basket of soiled linen and tipped in the contents. She went out into the garden, preparatory to going into the house, to make a nourishing vegetable broth for her sick father. The spring sunlight struck down on her bare head, and a light warm breeze flirted with the darned skirts of her muslin gown. She turned away from the house instead and wandered down to the end of the garden, where there was a rustic seat under the spreading branches of an apple tree. She wanted to pray for her father's recovery, but found she could not. What kind of God was up there who could ensure that the vicar, the Reverend Mr. Glossop, his wife, and two nasty daughters continued to live in riches and health while her father wasted away? When his curate, Mr. Westerville, had first fallen ill, Mr. Glossop had cut his miserable wages in half and had considered he was doing a great Christian act by paying him even a pittance. Lucinda knew it would be only a matter of time before Mr. Glossop